Hello, and we're back with another Go Ballistic transfer special. So a double dose of myself, Ryan Rowe and Roger Hanna this week. After Rangers on Tuesday, we're focusing on Celtic today. While we're not exactly in the, let's say, thick of signings coming and going as maybe Rangers were last week, we do have a potential arrival to be announced at Celtic soon. There's been rumours of some big money moves for players that, as of a few days ago, we hadn't quite heard of. We'll analyse that, and we'll also discuss a potential fan favourite coming back. And Casper Schmeichel's been talking about his retirement. Is that the kind of thing that you Celtic fans at home would be worried about if he decides to call it a day after his contract runs out? The first, though, we'll move to is Shin Yamada. This one's been in the kind of works for a while. He's said his goodbyes rather emotionally to Kawasaki Frontale. He's not been announced as yet by Celtic. Brendan Rodgers has kind of opened up and he's got medical things to go through. 1.5 million doesn't suggest a game changer, but if you look at the prices paid for Hatate and Maeda, they weren't exactly big bucks.
A lot of that was down to the contract he had at Kawasaki Frontale in the J League, Ryan. He does seem to be a highly rated player. Season before last, an awful lot of goals. This season, not quite so many, but I believe he's been in the Celtic radar for some time. They've had success in that market. You know, Kyogo Furuhashi, Daisen Maeda, Rio Hatate, who came from the same club, Kawasaki Frontale. So Celtic know what they're getting. There's not so much of a gamble if you're only paying $1.5 million. They need players in that final third. Brendan's spoken about it a few times recently. He's worried about the goals that were lost with Kyogo's departure in January and Nicholas Kuhn's departure in the summer window. So I think Yamada will be the first of a few in that area of the pitch.
Now at 25, he's not exactly a youngster, despite the fact that he's not actually had a lot of senior football due to the way the sort of Japanese the university system works. And with his most recent goal return of 2 goals across the whole season, do you think there may be a case of Celtic fans being a bit underwhelmed by this one, or is it just a case of patience? But how much patience can you have with someone that's actually 25 years old?
You just have to wait and see. He's maybe the Japanese Lawrence Shankland. That was the kind of scoring haul he had. Everything the season before last, not so much this season. The age of 25 I think is ideal. If he was 20 or 21, people would complain he was too young. If he was 30 or 31, he'd be too old. So I think 25 is good. It'll come at an age where not only can you cope with the football, but you need to be able to come over and cope with a different culture, a different society, a different language, different food. So, if you're 25, it's a good age to come in and embrace all of that. I think he could be a focal point for the Celtic attack. But Adam Idah said earlier in the week, he can be the man to score 30 goals next season for Celtic. So I think Brendan Rodgers just wants to give himself options up there.
Now, talking about options up there, a name that probably hands up not very many of us knew, but Louis Munteanu from Romania. Romanian under-21 international, scored 23 goals across league and cup for Cluj last season. Now, these reports have only kind of just surfaced over the last few days, and it's on the back of Celtic being linked to Giuseppe Ambrosini and losing out on him to Cremonese. But what do you make of this one? Because £6 million is the rumoured bid that was rejected. Now, Celtic haven't paid that for many players recently, and it would be a lot of money invested in one position, considering Adam Idah cost £9 million.
Yeah, it would, and it's the fee that sort of puts me off the reports ever so slightly. Celtic have spent that money, £11 million on Engels, but Engels was playing in a top league. He was about to become a Belgian international. You kind of knew what you were getting. 9 million for Adam Idah. Again, he'd been at Celtic on loan before. Celtic knew what they were getting. Even when they paid the big money for Jota and for Cameron Carter-Vickers, there was less risk in it because you knew they could perform in the team because they'd done it during loan spells. £7 million for someone who's not been tried in the country seems a sort of big investment for Celtic. When you look at what they've done with Benjamin Nygren and Shin Yamada in this window, I think the president of Cluj said he wanted 14 million. Good luck with that. So I don't know. I'm not saying he's not coming, but I would be surprised if Celtic paid 7 million to get him.
We've spoke about Adam Idah a little bit this summer. Again, £9 million. He didn't put that price tag on himself, but Do you see Celtic adding another striker in that maybe middle bracket between, say, a 1.5 million for Shin Yamada and a 6.9 million? Do you see another striker coming in that maybe costs in the middle of that? Or will Brendan Rodgers look to what he's got?
There's a lot of factors in that. I think a lot might depend on where Celtic are going European-wise. They do have a Champions League qualifier this year. I think if you get to the end of August and Celtic are in the Champions League groups, then they might just invest a wee bit more. They spent big right at the end of the window last summer. I don't think they'll spend big imminently, but they might well spend big if they know they've got that Champions League money coming in again. Football fans, football journalists, they're never patient. They want every deal done today and another one tomorrow. They don't like waiting to the end of the window to see what's going on, but I just have a feeling that Celtic will be busy toward the end of the window.
Talking about patience, well, just before we move on to another Louis, Adam Idah, would you encourage a bit more patience with him this season to Celtic fans, or is it time that he started delivering?
I mean, listen, he scored 20 goals last season. Odsonne Edouard scored 33 goals last season. If at the start of the campaign you'd said to a Celtic supporter, Idah and Idah are going to score you 53 goals, they'd have been absolutely delighted. They'd have been thrilled at the prospect of this. So a lot of it's in perception. I don't think Adam Idah had a bad season last year. If he had cost £2 million, people would be raving about him. The fact that Celtic had to pay what was probably over the odds is not the lad's fault. I think he could be better. I think if he gets more minutes, he's got the opportunity to score more goals. It's funny, he's scored goals in some big games. You know, year past May, he scored the winner in a Scottish Cup final. He got 2 in the Champions League away to Aston Villa. He can get goals against big teams. He's never really had that run. In the first half of the season it was Kyogo, the second half of the season it was Odsonne Edouard through the middle a lot, so you can see how he gets frustrated at times. But no, I wouldn't say fans need to be more patient. You know, the fans pay their money and they can make judgment calls on whoever they want.
So Luis Palma looks as though his Celtic career is all but done and dusted. Don't want to jump the gun or anything, but the most recent sort of exit destination seems to be a loan move to Lech Poznan. Are you maybe surprised that it's not a permanent move, and do you think Celtic really need to insert an obligation to buy clause here because his future doesn't really seem to be in Scotland?
Well, his future's not in Scotland, there's no doubt about that. I don't think really Brendan Rodgers has had him from day one, if you like.
You surprised it hasn't worked out?
No, not especially. I think it doesn't strike me as having perhaps the work ethic that Brendan demands of his players in terms of pressing without the ball, etc. It doesn't strike me as a Rodgers type of player. He went out on loan to Greece last season. He didn't pull up many trees there. No. So you're saying, you know, I'm surprised he's not going out permanently. You need to find a buyer to get players out permanently. You know, both Celtic and Rangers have found that and are finding that with various fringe players. It's difficult to get rid of them because they haven't really done anything that would convince potential buyers to fork out money for them. Mm-hmm. So if Celtic can get some of his wages paid by Lech Poznan, he'll go to Poland. I don't really see him coming back and making an impact.
Celtic fans, viewers at home or on the bus, on the train, wherever you are, let us know in the comments, is Luis Palma someone that you would have liked to have seen given more of a shot at Celtic Park, or the glimpses you got of him, particularly in the last season, you know, is this the correct decision for Celtic to move him on? And on a similar vein, Khun Yang, Brendan Rodgers has spoken recently. He said he thinks both probably will move on. Yang certainly had a lot more first team, you know, exposure than Kwon did, who had none and had to settle for loan spells elsewhere. Do you think he was given a fair crack of the whip, Yang? What did you make of him when you saw him?
Listen, all of these players get an opportunity. Maybe not in a game every week, but in training every day to impress the manager and the coaches. Kwon, he came, I think, from the South Korean second division, didn't he? It was always going to be a big ask. Never up to it at Celtic. Did okay at St Mirren, did okay at Hibs. Talking of now going to Austria, I think he won't play for Celtic. Yang had quite a few chances. I actually saw him the night. It's a Saturday night, Celtic won 5-2 at St Mirren about March time, and he did well. He came off the bench, scored a goal. I think he set one up as well. His girlfriend was over from South Korea at the time, and Brendan Rodgers credited that with his upturn in form. She clearly didn't stay to the end of the season though, because he was sort of back down to the way he'd been playing before. He's one of these lads, Ryan, it actually strikes you that he doesn't look as if he's convinced that he should be playing for Celtic, and that's half the battle.
So, one man who has looked as though he filled the jersey as soon as he came in is Casper Schmeichel. Yeah. Now, goalkeepers can play on a lot, obviously longer than plenty of their outfield contemporaries, but his contract at Celtic does expire at the end of this season coming. He's been pretty open in saying that as long as he feels fit and healthy that he's going to keep playing. The question may be in a year's time, is that still at Celtic? If the time comes to renew a contract, do the bean counters at Parkhead feel that if Kasper Schmeichel's asking for too much that he has to go elsewhere? And how badly do you think Celtic fans would take that? Is Sinisalo ready to take over?
I think the biggest factor this will be who's the Celtic manager next summer. Kasper Schmeichel came to Celtic to replace Joe Hart, who had done well, was retiring. Brendan knew Kasper from their days together at Leicester. He was available to come from Anderlecht, and he brought him in, and he did well. He did have a high-profile mistake in the Scottish Cup final, but I'm sure he's got the experience to bounce back from that and recover from that. I thought overall it was a good signing for Celtic. He's now into a second season. There's no reason why he couldn't play on. Look at Craig Gordon, still playing on well into his 40s with Hearts in Scotland. Kasper can play on for as long as he sees fit. But if Brendan's not there next summer, if you're looking at a new Celtic manager coming in, you find new managers probably want to have 2 or 3 of their own players in, and would that include a goalkeeper? It might well do.
Yeah, I mean, you look at Joe Hart, he obviously came in and played through last season with Brendan Rodgers as well, but he really, not to say Kasper Schmeichel hasn't, but Joe Hart seemed to really connect with the Celtic fans, a huge amount. And as you say, Schmeichel may just feel like, well, I came up here because of Brendan Rodgers. If someone comes in, the next manager might not fancy him either. But again, Celtic fans, would you be disappointed if this is indeed Kasper Schmeichel's last season? Let us know. Now, a fan favourite back in the day, Odsonne Edouard, his future at Crystal Palace looks as though it's, he doesn't have much of a future. Yeah. Brendan Rodgers was asked about it because there was reports this week that he potentially could be a target for Celtic to return. Not according to Brendan Rodgers. Would you, A, are you surprised that Rodgers poured cold water on this, and B, would Edouard fit in this current Celtic team again?
Oh, listen, Edouard would fit into the current Celtic team, no problem at all. He'll be in an awful lot of money. Yep. I think you'll find, Ryan, in terms of wages. I'm flabbergasted, a bit like Moussa Dembele. When Moussa Dembele left for Lyon, I thought his career would really go anywhere he wanted it to, and it didn't really. And it's the same with Edouard. When Edouard went to Palace, I thought he would hit the ground running and be an enormous success, and he's not done nearly as well as I thought he would. He then went on loan to Leicester. That didn't work out either, and he's had a really difficult time. He was making an awful lot of money, but he's had a difficult time in terms of his career. So I'll be fascinated to see where the next career move for Odsonne Edouard is. He was an outstanding player up here at Celtic. I thought he was exceptional, scored big goals in big games, cup finals, Old Firm games, and he looked as if the sky was the limit for him, but he stalled a bit. Yeah, it's funny, he probably made Celtic fans forget very quickly about Moussa Dembele, who obviously left. Edouard filled that mould and obviously went on to have a great career. And he had that quickest ever debut double in his first game for Crystal Palace, and since then he's done very little of note. You do wonder if maybe the next move is perhaps back to France or abroad, because another team in England, after seeing what he's produced in the last couple of years, just might not fancy him. Now, I suppose the last thing for us to say is thank you once again for tuning in. This has been another Celtic Transfer Special. We'll be back with 2 more next week, and we'll also have the big analysis of Rangers and the Champions League qualifiers against Panathinaikos. So let us know in the comments, do you have a prediction for that game? And as always, don't forget, if you haven't already, come on, you've got to subscribe by now.